afternoon, everyone. So I've got like 20 odd minutes and I've got a huge amount of stuff to kind of pack into it. So I'm going to go as fast as I can, which also means I'm kind of probably going to leave a lot of stuff out that you're going to see on the slides behind me. So you've heard already about the Digital Defence Report. It's about 100 pages, and I'm going to sum that into 10 points. So you've already heard with regards to the fact that if we look back over that kind of last year or so, the Digital Defence Report, in essence, goes from July 2023 to June 2024. Just to put that into perspective, so Microsoft is processing on a daily basis 95 trillion signals. So that's coming from 300 data centers. We've got 500 in progress, 350,000 miles of fiber and subsea cables, which means we have one of the biggest wide area networks in the world. You've heard of M365, Azure, Dynamics, LinkedIn, Bing, all of these things. So in essence, every time you connect or interface with the Microsoft network, we get a telemetry signal. How do you make sense of all of those signals? We've got 10,000 people working in cybersecurity. So I look back over that year, we've already heard a lot of the threat actors, they're getting more complex, better resourced. So if I look at the number of cyber attacks that just Microsoft is seeing, it's 600 million a day. 350 million of those are identity-based attacks. 99% of those are password sprays. So there's a reason why we tell you not to reuse passwords or use simple passwords, and this is why. So identity has now overtaken endpoints as the primary attack vector. But there is some little bit of good news on all of these things. So the ransomware encounters have gone up. The success rate has gone down by a third. Why is that? Well, being Microsoft, I've been telling you for a long time, extended detection and response. Having visibility end to end. So not only do I need to get access, I've got to elevate my privilege, I've got to laterally move, I've then got to get an admin, I've got to exfiltrate data. I've then got to encrypt all your systems and hope that nobody's noticed. But I do notice I shut it down. So in essence, what that means is I've got to change my tactics. So I'm foregoing the initial encryption and favoring just the exfiltration. So we've seen some threat actors in and out within 15 minutes. Now I'm going to hazard a guess and say a lot of your security operations SLAs is also 15 minutes, which is why I'm going to talk about AI. Can't go without Microsoft talking about AI in some realm or other. So I am going to dig into that, and I'm going to dig into a number of different things. So I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about nation-state actors. So we are actively tracking 1,500 large-scale threat actors, of which 600 of those are nation-state actors. Now I've got the big four on the screen. There are more than four, obviously. If I then look back at that previous year, we got Russia, so 75% of all of their attacks in that time frame, not surprising, targeted against Ukraine. As soon as Ukraine started to put troops on the ground on Russian soil, we saw an increase to 90%. And that's kind of going from November to November, and I'll give you some more insights on Russia in particular. So to China, being very consistent with who they're doing, what they're doing, really favoring their interests. Iran probably wouldn't surprise you when we say 50% of all of their attacks have been against Israel. And then North Korea as well have been quite consistent. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about is this kind of increase in proxy groups that we've seen. In essence, as a nation-state actor, if I actively target you, that other nation could see that as an act of aggression. It may have a military response. But if I use proxy groups, ransomware operators, activists, whatever the case it may be, it's actually really hard to track and trace and to attribute that attack, but also gives me a layer of defensibility. Now, the thing with North Korea, again, they're very consistent with who they are and what they're doing and how they're attacking. They're after cash and crypto and trying to further the regime. But we have seen an offshoot of Lazarus Group, if you're familiar with them, whom Moonstone Sleet. And in essence, what they're doing is actually creating their own ransomware. So I don't need a ransomware operator. I'm going to do it myself. So it's in essence a parting gift. I'm going to come at you anyway and steal your money. Might as well give you some ransom at the same time. Now, in November, I was actually with NATO ARC, Allied Rapid Response Corps, their cyber symposium. And one of the things they said, categorically, Russia is the enemy. So whenever we talk about these other nations, it's really Russia that we should be really talking about. And one of the things that they shared, this has come from Ukraine CERT, and was also shared by the UK military intelligence, in terms of the pattern of how they've been actively targeting different kind of sectors. So it's all started with IT. So you'll be familiar with NotPetya. in particular, probably one of the most destructive cyber attacks in history, very much like WannaCry, got in the wild. Russia learnt their lessons from that. But then we kind of take it to the next level. They said, if I want to then take out IT and take out the comms and take out software, I take out internet, I take out telcos. That means all of the kind of the IT and everything else goes down with it. How they've kind of evolved one step further, if I want to cause as much disruption as possible, I hit energy. I take energy out, I take everything out. And that's really the pattern that Microsoft is seeing. So I'm going to bring you up to date. I've kind of gone through that last year. I'm now going to bring you from June up to this point as well. So Seashell Blizzard, you might be familiar with. They've got multiple names. They're also known as Sandworm. So in essence, this is GRU. This is Russia's military intelligence. What I talked about, NotPetya, this is them. And we've seen this kind of active change in kind of what they're doing. So we probably saw, we go back 3 years ago to the start of the war in Ukraine, we saw more active cyber attacks, more destructive attacks in the first 4 months in the previous 8 years. It did not have the desired effect because they weren't banking on big tech like Microsoft and others stepping in the way. They have gone back to regroup, they have gone backwards to really kind of understand who's now helping Ukraine, what technology they're using, and therefore how do I evolve my attacks. So in November last year, we started to see an increase again. Backwards, we go back a previous year of the targeting around agriculture, pharmaceuticals, etc. Now we bring it to October. Now I sort of said that active targeting of energy. That is where their focus is. So you've probably heard of Indestroyer 1 and Indestroyer 2. So one of the things that obviously Russia are very good at, a lot of the energy in particular, in Ukraine is ex-Soviet, so they're very good at being able to target, but they're now thinking one step ahead, and what do I do about this? So Secret Blizzard is another part of the kind of Russian intelligence, very much like the GCHQ, NSA, that kind of thing, their signals, their comms. And they're being quite clever. They're actually utilizing the infrastructure of other nation-state actors. They're tunneling behind. So when we talk about these proxy groups, this is what we're talking about. It's really quite complex. Now, the interesting thing, did they steal access or did they purchase access? So we're thinking about different nation-state actors. So they've been utilizing the infrastructure of Pakistan, going in behind to target India and Afghanistan. They've also been targeting various, but you kind of think, if they're a nation-state actor, surely you're going to notice that someone else is actually using your infrastructure. So this is where it gets really complicated. As they say, are they buying it? Are they stealing it? But in actual fact, what this means is I don't need to spend my own time and my own effort trying to build this infrastructure to attack other countries or other entities. I'm just going to use someone else's because it makes it really so much easier. So let's get into the realm of activism. So we've seen a huge increase, pro-Russian, pro-Ukraine, pro-whatever. Some of these are working in isolation, but with that tracking and monitoring that we're doing, we are actually seeing a lot of these activists working in correlation with nation-state actors. So if I give you CARs, the Cyber Army of Russia, so one of the things that they actively did is actually targeted Ukraine's media. Now what we identified was actually behind that attack was Seashell Blizzard, Sandworm. And so we're kind of seeing this real interplay between activism, nation-state actors, and it's, as you say, it's really hard to really prove what are they doing or not doing. As I said, I can't get away from talking about AI and its kind of influence over the last sort of couple of years, and how is this dramatically changing the threat landscape. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in particular. But when we talk about AI in the realm of cybersecurity, it's really kind of from three different perspectives. First of all, it's the security of the AI itself, the large language models. And so we talk about poisoning, flooding the data system. You can reverse engineer it. If I can understand it, I can manipulate it. And we started to see a huge increase in prompt injections, which has led to a number of those technology providers introducing safety rails. And now they're trying to jailbreak the system. So no longer are we seeing social engineering of people, we're seeing social engineering of machines. In essence, I'm trying to understand how far I can go, how far I can break the system. So we have an increase in AI-enabled cyber attacks, and I'm going to give you some examples of these as well at the same time. That's where I'm going to kind of focus on. And then as the reverse of that is the AI for security. How do we fight fire with fire, in essence? So let me kind of give you some examples. So Forest Blizzard, again, are part of Russia military intelligence. So they have been utilizing these off-the-shelf large language models, so you can say ChatGPT, Gemini, various others, and they're using it to do reconnaissance. So I talked about comms, targeting of communication, so really understanding satellite imaging systems, GPS. And so of all those nation-state actors I talked about, it is Russia in particular who are investing their time and effort into really deeply understanding communications and satellite technology. So this is kind of a sign almost of what's to come. If I then talk about North Korea and Emerald Sleet. So again, they're looking at reconnaissance. They're actively targeting different people, different regimes in defense and nuclear. And so they're really refining their spearfishing campaigns. If I talk about Crimson Sandstorm, Iran. So one of the things that Iran are not really great for is human rights, in particular how they treat women. So one of the things that they've been doing is creating websites, in essence, and it's a way of actually tracking feminists. So this is mass surveillance of their own people. We then look at Salmon Typhoon that's coming from China. They're using those large language models, not just steal information, but translate it from whatever country that they took it from and translating that into Mandarin and other languages. Now, across all of those nation-state actors, one other thing is also consistent. Is I need to gain access into your network, I need persistence on the net without you actually realizing it. So they're using the large language models to teach themselves about operating systems. Now again, I talk about Microsoft, we've been running Patch Tuesday for the last 20 years, and so every first Tuesday of every month we bring out, here's a number of vulnerabilities, you need to patch your systems. So they're actually trying to work out, what is that? How can I exploit it? And so in essence what they do is, how do I hide in plain sight? How do I do all of these things? And so they're really kind of honing into these various, now there is again some good news, again with Salmon Typhoon. They actually just asked the large language directly outward, how do I create malware? And it blocked it. So when I talk about these kind of safety rails and things that are put in, they are actually working. Now, Storm 1152 is a Vietnamese organized crime group. So they actually created 750 million fake Microsoft accounts. Part of that is to sell that on the dark web, sell it to other threat actors in particular. So our digital crimes unit is a team within Microsoft who actually protects Microsoft for impersonations. So we have a team of lawyers all across the globe that does actually these takedowns where we seize infrastructure. Now, part of that, we have actually seized a number of infrastructure and fake websites and domains actually from Storm 1152, but they just reappear. It's like whack-a-mole. One of the things that they're doing, if you think about capture, you think about how they use a lot of the retail sites and various things, you have all these different layers. And so they're actually utilizing the large language models to create human-like signatures. And so this is just going to continue to evolve. We see nation-state actors, organized crime is going to get into the hands of the many threat actors, the opportunists. They're all going to figure out how to use AI. So let's talk about deep fakes. Let's talk about how they're utilizing that as well at the same point. Now, again, if we kind of think about what are they doing, okay, we've got deep fakes and everything else, but how they try and legitimize their type of attacks is actually spoofing mainstream media. So people would take to social media, they see these kind of things going on, they want to find the truth. But if I legitimize that by pretending it's actually come from the BBC or other news sites, then people start to believe it, they start to amplify. So one of the things from Russia in particular is really trying to make out that President Zelensky is corrupt, all that money, all that humanitarian aid that's been given by all these countries providing that support is actually just going in his back pocket, in essence. So how we've seen this, we've seen electoral interference across the globe. Again, it's very much with regards to that interference. Who are they pushing, not pushing as a favourite candidate? So you can kind of get a flavour for who they were against, let's be honest. Now, Volga Flood is Russia's propaganda engine. And so one of the things that they do, they've actually deployed 2,000 people just to work on propaganda alone. So this is kind of where we're going. Not only are we talking about cyber attacks, we're talking about cyber influence operations. So what do we learn from this? These things are going to get harder and harder to detect. They're going to get better. Along in the days when you talk about phishing emails, it's full of spelling mistakes and grammar. They are learning, they're refining. And so they're almost too perfect because it really has learned. If I'm kind of target an 18-year-old, an 80-year-old, I'm using advanced linguistics. So if they're using AI for learning about operating, learning about technology, evasion techniques, we have to think in the same ways. How do I utilize that same technology in reverse? We've got to get better and better at learning and utilizing this technology for our advantage. Now, I look about AI for security. There's a number of different things. We can talk about incident response. We can talk about triaging, utilizing large advanced linguistics and various different things. I'll give you an example of what one thing that Microsoft has done in particular with regards to how we are utilizing these large language models. So I talked about the fact that we have patch queues. Now, industry standard, believe it or not, for someone to come to Microsoft, I've identified a vulnerability, so we need to understand, reverse engineer it, what's it attached to, does it lie dormant, what's its job? We'd have to create a patch, test the patch, deploy the patch. That's 90 days to do that. So we've committed to get that down to 45 days, and how we are doing that is utilizing these power of large language models to actually understand code, understand malware, and really put it to work. So there's just some real good examples of how that technology is being utilized against a lot of these different attacks. Now again, there's a lot of things that Microsoft is doing. So last summer, we actually signed up to the Munich Tech Accord, which has got multiple big techs coming together and saying, how can I help people understand what is AI generated? What is data provenance? How do I make this not being altered? This is not a deep fake. Someone hasn't kind of taken this and reutilized it. So it's understand the true source of the information, using micro-dotting and various different technologies to really think about how we really embed digital literacy for the masses. And so I kind of then think about what's next. How's Microsoft evolving? So one of the things that we've introduced is this kind of hierarchy of cybersecurity needs, if you like. And this is really taken from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you think about as humans, with basic needs, we need water, we need food, we need shelter. We don't have any of those things. There's no point to anything else. This is the same principle. So you're going to hear us about identity, identity, identity. You've probably heard about us talking about this a lot, but that's really, really cool. Identity faster, then you kind of move up the pyramid, if you like. Now, Microsoft itself has also been the crosshairs of a number of nation-state actors, and so we launched our Secure Future Initiative. This is a multi-year program. It is the biggest cybersecurity engineering program in history. We have dedicated 34,000 engineers to really think about identity, networking, engineering. How do we kind of do all these things? Now, Satya Nadella has said this is so important that he is the executive sponsor. And security is #1 priority. So when you have a list of things that all need doing, and we have a lot of big things that need doing, security is #1. What does that mean? Ultimately, this is about secure by design, secure by default, and secure operations. You can debate till the cows come home, what does it really mean when we say secure by design and secure by default? In essence, what it means is more and more things are coming out of the box. Whether you like it or not, it's going to get turned on. Now, you can turn it off, you can still have the different policies and processes and do all the things that you need to do, but in essence, you're going to use our technology, you're going to get all of these things that are there right out of the box. And so you're going to see more of this. We're sharing our lessons learned. Just again, to put that into a little bit of perspective, Microsoft has shut down 5.75 million tenants. So when we talk about tech debt, and we talk Microsoft is on another level because we have to run faster than everybody else combined. Because if you're going to use our technology, we've got to have all of these things in play. We've also shut down 750,000 applications. That just gives you a kind of a scale for what we're talking about. So where do we go next? So a lot of the time we're talking about this difference between disruption versus destruction. We're seeing more and more, as I mentioned Russia, I've mentioned others, really talking about investing in critical infrastructure, really disrupting supply chains as much as possible. We've probably got a little inkling of that with the CrowdStrike incident last year. Yeah, it wasn't a cyber incident, but we've just given them a playbook. If I want to disrupt as much infrastructure as possible, I just set these things loose and watch the world implode on itself. But AI is going to get cheaper and cheaper. It's going to get more mainstream, which means we're going to see more and more of this amplification in use of attacks, which means that we have to also invest in this technology, whether we like it or not. And as the technology gets better and better at looking at these anomalies, the smallest little thing, the threat actors are going to have to go backwards. And why am I going to waste my time going up against AI when I can go directly to the source, and that's the human? So we're seeing a huge increase in social engineering. Go back to where I started, that increase in threat-based attacks, 99% of password sprays. And this is just how easy it is. I'm going backwards into all the things that I did before. And I talk about cyber influence operations. So as much as we talk about cyber security and cyber attacks, cyber influence is really key. Now, those 2,000 people that we talked about, they are already setting things in motion. They are also already looking at radicalization, extremism, bringing back the far right in various different European countries. I'm turning people on or off to various different subjects. I'm turning them on or off to different politicians. I'm creating new stories right now so that in the future, when someone starts looking backwards, it's time-stamped on the right date. And so these are all the kind of things that we need to think about. It's not just the fact that with today's threat, how's this evolving over the next 18 months, 2 years, 3 years, because they are prepared to play the long game, and they're really, really good at it. So kind of to round out, I'm going to take some questions. Hopefully we've got enough time. If not, we can take some over the drinks. But what does this mean? Talked already about secure by design and default, having the right configs, coding this in. We talk about the cloud, having these things out of the box as quickly as possible. We are introducing self-healing systems. So all the excuses that people utilize, I can't patch, I can't take it down, it's too important, we're going to do it for you. And so we're actively monitoring using AI to really understand what can we do on your behalf. So you're going to, again, see more and more of this. And I've already talked about identity. Identity, #1 priority. Please remember that. Whether that's machines, whether that's people, it really is that kind of important. Now, an interesting point that I just wanted to kind of end on is this whole thing here is the speed of relevance. And that kind of came from NATO. You may have heard of it from military before. And that means it's great having all this information, not really helpful if I'm not putting it in all your hands, and I'm dealing with that information as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So part of that is also incumbent on us and other technology providers to not just have this intelligence, get it out, block, do all these things, but make sure that you're aware of it at the same point. And data, the final point is data. Ultimately, what are they after? They have to monetize their attack, otherwise what's the point? They're not all financially motivated, as we've seen, some of activists, they're nation-state actors. But ultimately, I need data. So identity and data are your two priorities. That's kind of really sort of core. Now, I don't know how much time I've got. I'm happy to take questions. We're going to have a few.
With Russia, you, Sir Graham, etc., mentioned Russia's a big key actor. Sir Graham, as he walked out, made a passing comment about that situation in Ukraine ending. Ukraine's targeted. Are you preparing for a shift in that dynamic, sort of globally? Who will be the next big player? Will there be a power shift internally within those key players? And what are you doing to, I guess, it's been openly said we're at war. How do you guys sort of combat and go into combat mode against that?
So, Michael, we're very careful of the fact that we are a commercial entity. And so we have to kind of think about our realm. We are not a government. We're not allowed to kind of get involved in some of these things. But there is a kind of a pattern when we kind of think about, ultimately, Microsoft is an international company, but we're also an American company. So when we talk about all the intelligence that we have, people think, oh, you're biased, you're one side. We talked about the big four. We're actually tracking every single threat actor, irrespective of who they are. So if it's the US, it's the UK, it's whoever, we are tracking them. And we also provide nation-state notifications. So any one of those is on the front door of your network, we actually tell you. And so it's incumbent on us to share this information, but there's also some countries we do not actively share any intelligence with. Some of those we've talked about today. And so we are already in this kind of weird mentality that we've gone from not just protecting individuals and organizations, we're now in the realm of protecting nations. And that's a kind of a strange dynamic to be in, but that's the kind of the world that we stepped into, as you sort of said, to protect Ukraine. So we've given them free technology, we moved them to the cloud rapidly, and we've committed to do that. I think the dynamics will change at some point, going forward as we sort of geopolitics and everything else like that. But we're very committed to that cause and kind of what we're doing. And I think one of the biggest lessons learned that we did through, so the initial sort of, I'd say, first 12 months, 18 months of that, well, a lot of the information that we have would have only been shared historically with other intelligence agencies. We've got a government sharing program and various things. Microsoft actually made the decision ourselves to push more of this information into the public domain. Because we said ultimately, as we sort of said, if this information is only known by a few, so if we only tell different intelligence and government, how does that help anyone in this room? So if you're making active decisions about your business models, like today maybe you have operations in China, maybe you need to think about, is that still going to make sense? It's not an easy thing to pull out of that country or move it to that country or do these things. But this is like, you need to be informed, you need to kind of understand what's going on so you can make those decisions. And I think arguably that is in essence why we have been in the crossfires ourselves of two very big significant nation state actors. Now, I just very briefly just mentioned about Midnight Blizzard, who is one of the Russian threat actors. You may have heard it was very public back in January of last year. They got access into Microsoft's corporate infrastructure. It is not necessarily to think about how they got in, but why. The why is actually really interesting because they were looking in for intelligence about themselves. So what is it you think we know? What is it you think we don't know? Are you about to change your modus operandi? And if we could kind of look at the hindsight, look backwards and see what's come since, that we have started to see that change. As we sort of active targeting, they've really refined their malware, they've adjusted their processes, and we might kind of keep seeing that. But that is the realm that we work in. And I think even from SolarWinds, there was a few executive orders that you might have seen come from the White House. So I think President Biden, just before, the huge number of executive orders that we've not even digested yet. But one of those things, in essence, was we need more public-private sector collaboration and big tech. You have a role to play in that. So that's a kind of, we're in this sort of, let's say, this weird world where we're kind of right in the middle of all of it. And kind of what does that mean? But there's obviously big tech that are aligned to the West. There's obviously big tech that are aligned into the East and other nations. So that's the kind of, it is the realm that we're working in. I'm not sure we've got time. We've got time for another question? Oh, we're up against it. Okay. I am going to be around for drinks. I'm sure there's lots of questions that we didn't get time for. But thank you.